Hello, and welcome back to Take It or Leave It Commentaries. Today, we're going to be continuing our look at the TV series Dallas. This will be episode 5, the final episode of the introduction miniseries of Dallas. It's titled Barbecue, and I'll be watching this on Amazon Prime. If you'd like to follow along with your own copy, you can start it now. The episode, of course, begins with the typical opening that we've kind of gotten used to with the mini series, with the same differences and of course the same different house, which is the box ranch. We'll get a good look at the box ranch in this episode. A lot of this takes place outside on the actual box ranch, and that's the focus of this episode in general. It's the first time we actually see the Ewing barbecue. The Ewing barbecue is actually very similar to a real event that was held on the Box Ranch, which was called the Cattle Barons Ball. The owner of the Box Ranch, Cloyce Box, he was a former NFL wide receiver. He held the event. I couldn't find out if it was every year or just occasionally or what, but it was a huge event. They had stars like Willie Nelson perform. You can look online and you'll see several pictures of cast members actually attending the event. And this was after they had stopped filming at the Box Ranch, so they obviously, uh, were still on good terms with Cloyce Box even after he asked them to stop filming at the ranch. Cloyce Box was a very interesting guy. He obviously at one point had lots and lots of money and did very well, but later on he got in trouble with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The FBI was kind of indirectly involved in investigating him as part of a loan he made to one of his employees. Later on, he opened a cement plant that he was able to open only because he took out a loan on the actual Box Ranch, which there's a great look at the Box Ranch, probably the best one in the series, along with some other shots later in this same episode. But when the cement factory went under, Box apparently lost everything, and of course, the Box Ranch eventually burned down, and it's a shame it's not there anymore. It's obviously a beautiful home. And in addition to focusing on the barbecue, we also get a lot of background information concerning Jock and Digger. This is obviously Jock and Bobby discussing the fact that Pam wants Digger to attend the barbecue, which I guess in some respects makes sense since she's married to Bobby and Digger is now Bobby's father-in-law. But excuse me, I'm not sure it's part of the actual story of Dallas at this point, but in Dallas, the early years, they show the fact that at a earlier Ewing barbecue that took place in the 50s, Digger actually tried to kill Jock. So Jock has every reason not to invite him to the barbecue. And here's Cliff and Pam and Digger and cousin Jimmy, who we never see again, which I think is kind of a lost opportunity. They could have had more Barnes family members in the show as the series went on, and maybe had an opportunity to expand the cast with maybe some younger people. But it was pretty much just Pam, Digger, and Cliff, and Digger, of course, dies fairly early in the series. This Digger tends to be the one that, based on what I see and read, that fans prefer. It's David Wayne, and I prefer David Wayne's version of Digger as well. He also plays Digger in the first series, in the first season of the series. Excuse me. Later, he was replaced by Keenan Wynn, who played the character until Digger was killed off. And here we get some further background on the Barnes Ewing feud. And again, this is another reason why Chuck has every reason not to want Digger there. He still falsely blames Jock for supposedly stealing his money and his oil well and his girlfriend, who Miss Ellie was never really his girlfriend in the first place. But why you'd want someone like that around, especially with you being worried that he's going to down every bit of booze you have at the party. Again, it makes sense to me. I wouldn't want him there either. But David Wayne does a good job here. This is basically just a monologue about how much he hates Jock and why. Later, of course, Cliff would actually be at most of the barbecues, and that didn't make any sense either. He's tried to ruin the family again and again and again. He tried to put Jock in jail. He thought about killing Jr. Of course, I guess you can't blame him from his perspective with everything that went on, but still, you don't invite those people to your party. You get some good looks at the box ranch here as well. That classic red Mercedes is really hard to beat. Just that body style of the convertible Mercedes always looked great, and it's still the car that I think most fans, including me, associate the most with Bobby's character. And here we go. And this is when Lucy was perfect for the role, really. Excuse me, not Lucy. Charlene Tilton was perfect for Lucy. I mean, she really does look like a precocious teenager. As I've mentioned in the other videos, it's unfortunate she wasn't able to kind of grow with the role. She she always had the look of kind of a teenager and just couldn't transition into any kind of adult storylines that I think would have benefited the show. Here we're about to get into the other main storyline of this episode, which is Pam's pregnancy, and that would become a running theme throughout the series with Pam's desire to have a child and her inability to have one and her unwillingness to have one. And then, of course, when Victoria Principal left the show, hey, sorry about that. My software clicked off for a bit, but we didn't really miss much. We're still in the same scene. I was able to pause it before it went much forward, but to pick up on what I was saying, when Pam finally gets the news that her doctors believe she can carry a child to full term, she's blown up in Bobby's red Mercedes, and then they have that convoluted, terrible plot with her being spirited away from the hospital by her people at Wentworth and all that kind of craziness, which was just terrible and a sign that it was the beginning of the end for the series. This is unusual in that we see Victoria Principal in some kind of lingerie type outfit. Very rarely for the rest of the show would we see Pam in anything that was too revealing. She wore very tight dresses and skirts and all kinds of stuff like that, and she wore swimsuits, but we didn't see her in things like negligees and that sort of thing very often. And this is some good writing here, the way Pam tells Bobby that she's pregnant, and Patrick Duffy and Victoria Principal both do a really good job in this scene of seeming very excited. And I'm assuming this bedroom is not at the Box Ranch. I'm assuming this is another bedroom at the Aldridge house where they filmed the interior scenes for the miniseries. Although there were a couple of small scenes they filmed in the Box Ranch, I don't think this is one of them. I think those are most likely the scenes in the kitchen that we've seen. I think we mainly saw that in the prior episode. But what happened with the Pam's whole her getting taken away from the hospital and all that was just ridiculous. I think Pam's role probably could have been successfully recast with someone. There were a lot of young actresses that I think probably would have done fine, although I understand the show would have been very hesitant to do something like that after what happened with Donna Reed. That recasting had been a disaster pretty much for everyone involved, including Donna Reed, maybe especially for Donna Reed. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try again. Daytime soaps do things like that all the time, and if they wanted to take the daytime soap route, they could have had her injured in the car accident, and then she had to have extensive surgery and recast her after that, and I think that could have easily worked. But they didn't ask me my opinion, obviously. Excuse me. And there's Ray. Ray would be seen with a lot of young ladies over the years at the Ewing barbecue, whether he was married to someone at the time or not. Ray has some very interesting times at the Ewing barbecue, but I guess every character has some pretty interesting events take place at the annual event here. And why Lucy is wearing that whatever that is around her. Don't they call that a shawl or something like that? It reminds me of something that Marsha Brady would be wearing, especially someone like Lucy, who would be based on her character trying to show as much skin as she possibly could. There, she's actually got it off her shoulders, but still, it looks ridiculous. And there's Jr. romancing someone. Excuse me. And just like the other episodes of the miniseries, we've barely seen Jr. here. He's still a secondary character in the minds of the writers and producers of the show. The main protagonists at this point are still considered to be Pam and Bobby, especially Pam. But that's a good little interaction between Lucy and the secretary. And having these African Americans serving these rich white people in Texas at this plantation looking home is something you would certainly not see today on television. That would be not allowed, and people would be up in arms to say the least. And here's a good moment with Digger looking kind of wistfully at Miss Ellie. And of course, the wind is blowing and blowing and blowing. I was in Texas recently and in Dallas, and actually went to Duncan Acres, and the wind is, man, it just blows and blows in Texas, which makes the scenes of the family having breakfast outdoors just totally unrealistic, that you would go out and get completely blown around in your suits, and the women who have just done their hair and everything else, not to mention how hot it gets. I was lucky enough not to be there in the summer. I scheduled my trip intentionally so we would not be there when it was sweltering, but the wind is a definite issue in Texas. And here, of all the guys, why would Lucy be supposedly interested in this dude? I don't really get that. And I'm sure JR would be thrilled that Pam is trying to get another Barnes involved with another Ewing here. But back to the whole plot with Victoria Principal leaving the show. It's another example of the writers just not learning their lesson with what they went through with Patrick Duffy. Patrick Duffy swore up and down that when he left the show, he would never return, and he wanted them to kill off Bobby, so that there was no possible way some other actor could come in or that he could come back. And they, for whatever reason, listened to him instead of just having the Bobby character depart, because at that point in the storyline, Bobby was at a crossroads with Jenna and Pam. It would have been very easy to explain that Bobby just had to get out of town for a while and clear his head, and then, wait a year and see if Patrick Duffy's mind may have changed, or to see what else they could maybe do with that. Instead, they backed themselves into a corner and killed him off in the way that they did. So as soon as Patrick Duffy comes back, they wrote themselves into another corner by having him and Pam get married, knowing Victoria Principal's contract was up and that she, presumably they would know that she was not going to re-sign, or that they would not offer her, because they weren't able to, enough money to re-sign. So they wrote themselves into a corner with the wedding and then had to explain what happened to her, instead of just maybe having them engaged for a while and having something else come up where maybe Pam left or something else. Just leave the door open so that the two characters aren't married, and there might be some reasonable explanation for why Pam might be gone. That is, if you're not willing to recast the part. But anyway, I'll never understand why they didn't learn their lesson with what they went through with Patrick Duffy. They could have avoided some really bad storylines. This is a really big undertaking for a series that will really, this entire miniseries kind of serves as its own pilot for the show. To stage an event like this is really more something you'd see in a TV movie of the time, not in a what's basically serving as part of a pilot of a series. I love Jock just sitting there boozing it up. That's perfect for the character. I'm just gonna suck down as much whiskey here as I can. And here's a conversation between these folks that are serving the rich white people that you would never see for obvious reasons. There's also not enough people working this event to really. People would be waiting in long lines to get food and drink if there's only a couple of people that are supposedly in charge of serving everybody. And there's Jock. Just give me the bottle and I'll pour my own. Well, there's some other workers. And I guess you could say as well, like some of the other episodes in this series served as a way to get some background information and to set up the characterizations of the players here. This serves to kind of set up a good bit about Jock, Ellie, and Digger going forward. This expands their characters and explains more about why they behave the way they behave. And this here is kind of Jock's version of the same the same type of monologue that Digger gave earlier in the show. You got Digger's version of what happened between them, and that was a good way of writing, and Jock's version in a way that seemed natural. And here's Ellie's monologue and her version. I did not watch this episode. I've seen it several times, but I did not watch it again before I did the recording. I thought I'd just do it and speak off the cuff. So I didn't remember that each character that I just mentioned, Jock, Ellie, and Digger, would all have, sort of a monologue here, giving their version of the events that led to the Barnes Ewing feud. That's interesting. And I think that's the house behind them. And there doesn't, well, no, there's some people. I was about to say there's the house behind them, but I don't see any people at the party, but you can see them off in the distance. I thought maybe they would have filmed this on a different day without all the extras and stuff around. And here's Sue Ellen, we barely seen her in this episode as well. Sue Ellen is even more of a secondary character than Jr. As we've discussed with the previous episodes and with this one, she's not even listed in the opening credits. So Linda Gray does not appear in the opening cast credits until the series actually begins its first full season. But Linda Gray does a great job there. You can see kind of the worry and the hurt in her eyes when she gets the news about Pam. And although things are clearly tense with Sue Ellen and JR, as we're about to see coming up, there's no real direct mention of what happened in the last episode with those people taking the family hostage because of JR's extramarital shenanigans. No one really mentions it at all, but which you could understand the other characters maybe not wanting to bring that up, but it's a little strange that Sue Ellen and JR aren't discussing it more, if only to remind the audience about what happened. And unbeknownst to anyone, the audience or the writers or anyone else right there, I'm sure, there we get our very significant first look at Sue Ellen turning to alcohol to drown her sorrows. That would become a major storyline for really most of Linda Gray's time on the series. Sue Ellen, of course, went through many bouts of alcohol abuse. That's a great way for her to kind of say that they're very bountiful marriage. I love that line. And already we see that Sue Ellen knows right where to hit JR. The fact that someone else might have a male Ewing heir before he does, that that gets him right in the gut where it hurts. So so that's kind of telling as well, as far as their ongoing relationship and how they both know exactly where each other's buttons are and how to press them and how to press them hard. I apologize, by the way, for all the background noise. I'm not sure if anyone can hear that, but I waited for the yard people to get finished today before I made this video, and everyone else in the neighborhood seems to have their landscaper people here today too. So I finally just had to wait until it seemed the most quiet to try and record this. So I hope that's not making much a racket in the background. I just noticed Jimmy just took a bite of something on his fork and he didn't have anything on it. this is a really bizarre conversation with Lucy trying to find out whether or not this Jimmy guy is a homosexual. You wouldn't see this today either, I don't think, or I don't know, maybe you would. It's hard to say, but also it's a little bit ironic since Lucy ends up engaged to the man wearing kid during the first season, and he turns out to genuinely be an in the closet gay man. So it's unusual on a couple of different levels. And here we go. The first time we see Sue Ellen drunk, it will definitely not be the last. Of course, Sue Ellen at one point almost uh, causes the death of John Ross when she's still carrying him. She escapes from the sanitarium where she's supposedly getting treatment for alcoholism, and she's been bribing someone there to bring her booze, and escapes when she's had a lot of it, and then gets in a car accident and then goes to the hospital. And it's a mess. Of course, back then, and it's hard to imagine now, but it was certainly never okay to drink a lot when you were pregnant. Um, but I remember clearly it was certainly not frowned upon to occasionally have some wine, or even some drinks when you were carrying a child. So it was definitely a different time, and people smoked when they were carrying a baby. Just like people used to smoke on airplanes and in restaurants and inside your house and didn't think a thing about it. So things have definitely changed when it comes to that, but it's still, and you can tell by the way they treat Sue Ellen's drinking when she's pregnant. They're not as mortified and quick to act like you would be these days. Even her doctor is fairly nonchalant about the whole thing, but these days you'd be locked up for stuff like that. I don't mean locked up in prison, but they would certainly be trying harder to get a mother to be off the booze, and for good reason. I mean, that can cause serious damage to a baby. And this is something else, because I didn't rewatch the episode before this, that I didn't really notice. This is a monologue for Sue Ellen there, which tells a lot about her character, and that's unusual that they'd spend the time to build up and kind of expand her Sue Ellen's character in that way, since, as I mentioned earlier, Linda Gray is not even included in the opening credits. That's a good jock moment. Like, don't lecture me or waste a bunch of time. I got things to do. I don't want to be here. What's going on? Although it seems like Jock could have put this together on his own. And Jim Davis and Barbara O'Getty's there seem genuinely pleased. That's good acting. I guess that wouldn't be the toughest acting thing to put on a happy face if you're supposedly going to have a grandchild, but still they do a good job. I mean, you would think they're genuinely having a grandchild together. And there's something about David Wayne, as I mentioned earlier, about preferring him as Digger. He just looks like he would fit in at a different time with Jock and Maselli. I mean, you just get the feeling that they've all seen a lot and they've all seen it together, and that that Digger truly believes, even though it's demonstrated later to be not true. He genuinely thinks that Jock is responsible for his lot in life, and that he really did steal Maselli and really stole the oil and everything else. There's a great scene in early in the when the I keep wanting to say first season, but it's not the first season. It's since the DVDs and all that, it's considered the second season. But earlier in the first full season, I'll say it that way, of Dallas, where Digger has gotten really drunk and he drives like a maniac onto South Fork, which of course at that point is Duncan Acres, and he wants money for the fact that Pam now belongs to Jock, like everything else. At least that's how Digger sees it. And I forget exactly. He wants $5,000 or $10,000 or something, and Jock just throws $100 bill at him, and David Wayne as Digger says "sold." It's a great scene between the two of them. This with what happens with Jr. as this episode moves forward is really the part of this episode that stands out to me the most as far as being different from the way the series eventually evolved. It's just they're still kind of figuring out all the characters really, but especially Jr. As he's more of a secondary character. He's not the smooth, calculating, sinister, for lack of a better word, J.R. Ewing that he would become later, and you see it here with him letting himself get sloppy drunk in front of all these people. You just didn't see that from Jr. He was always a hard drinker, but I can't remember another time where he got really drunk in front of other folks. He would not wanted have wanted his peers and his colleagues or his competitors. So sorry about that. I don't know why my recording stuff keeps shutting off randomly. But hopefully we'll be able to get through the episode without it happening again. But as I was saying, I can't imagine Jr. letting himself go like that in front of all the people I just mentioned and getting that drunk in public. It just wasn't in his character. We did see him drunk, but that was mainly saw him a lot of times like the next day after he was really hungover or after Jock died. We saw him in very bad shape, but rarely saw him. I mean, never, as far as I can remember, saw him just that sloppy drunk. And so here we go with Digger in this rant. And so what is Maselli telling Jock? Leave him alone. Jock's not doing. Jock didn't start it. Digger's the one calling him a thief to his face at his own home. Jock has every reason to be angry. Victoria Principal looks great there. Oh, and there we go. I didn't remember they referenced the time he really did try to kill Jock. They don't get specific about it, but he as I talked about earlier, he tried to shoot him at a previous barbecue. And what is Pam raising hell about? I mean, Jock just told you the truth about the situation. What is she still? I mean, I guess you're not just going to turn off sticking up for your father just because you heard the truth, even if you actually believe what he had to say. But and then Miss Ellie's trying to console Digger. Digger's the one that just started that whole ridiculous confrontation. And here we go. I mean, now he's going to get wasted. And here he is. Now, I don't understand all these people gathered around watching this clearly incredibly inebriated person jump around. That does not look entertaining to me. I mean, I could see if Digger was just drunk or tipsy and people thought, oh, hey, there's somebody having a good time. I mean, you see that all the time at weddings and other events, but he's smashed. I don't, I don't, I don't know that a lot of people would really find it entertaining to gather around and watch him, clearly indulge in a bad problem. And Pam acts like she's just now seeing that he's smashed. Where is she? Where has she been for the last? I don't know. How long would it take you to get that drunk if you were a chronic alcoholic? Uh, Even if you were drinking straight, I guess maybe a couple of hours. Where she's been? Where has she been? This is kind of funny with Jr. buddying up to Digger, and that's a good Jr. line there. How long y'all been married? About 20 minutes. Now, telling Digger to drink up or somebody else as part of some plot or maybe just to make someone look ridiculous is certainly something. Um, there's a dog just wandering around in the background. It's certainly something Jr. would do later in the series, but not when he's inebriated. Pam always knows right where to go to find Lucy. She's always in the loft above the stables. Jeez, no one ever mentions it, but I would hope the character of Lucy is on some pretty reliable birth control, or she'd have a mess on her hands, especially after everything with Ray, since they end up being related. That I don't think the Ewings would appreciate an inbred child hanging around. Pam's going to stay in the hayloft to catch her breath. That's common. Well, whatever they were doing, they didn't get too far into it. Jimmy didn't even take his jacket off. And there's Sue Ellen. You don't see Sue Ellen actually writing very often. I can't imagine Linda Gray knew how to ride a horse before this, but she's doing a good job with whatever amount of lessons she was able to have for the show. If you watch enough television and see enough movies, it makes it seem as if riding a horse is pretty easy. I mean, all you got to do is just climb on, and the horse will just kind of casually start trotting around. But it doesn't work that way. Like most things, it's much more difficult than it appears. I love Bobby, of course. The character of Bobby is already consistent with who he would become in the series, which according to Patrick Dovey, I think is one of the things that made him not that interesting to play. He's always the good guy, even right there trying to catch Sue Ellen and here trying his best not to take out his anger on JR and let JR provoke him here, but eventually he gives in. I'll say this would have been a scene that would have easily fit into the series later on, except for the fact that JR's as drunk as he is. Actually, would have been a really good scene. I mean, Sue Ellen riding around the horse drunk, Bobby punching out JR, but JR could have said those exact same lines without actually being drunk, and it would have, it's easy to see that fitting in once the series really got going. JR's car is conveniently parked right there. I mean, I guess we're supposed to believe Sue Ellen went home and got the car and drove it over there, which makes some sense, I suppose. Convenient that the keys were in it. See there, you just don't see JR in that sort of sad shape later. Again, unless we see him hung over or when after Jock had died in South America. That's about it. Even later in the series, which I hate to even mention the real later seasons of the series because they're so awful compared to what the show was at its height. But we'll take the last episode for example, when JR has lost everything and they have that completely ridiculous thing with the devil coming to show him what people's lives would have been like without him around and all that, which is just about unwatchable. JR is not falling around and sloppy looking, even though he's obviously at the end of his rope. So this, so it took a while, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, for them to really get a handle on the JR character and what he needed to be going forward. And this scene too is very creepy. I mean, what exactly is on JR's mind here? Is he, and again, Victoria Principal right there, it looks great. That's not consistent either. JR would have been thrilled with Pam moving out, and this seems genuine. JR genuinely doesn't want them to leave, and he's begging her to work it out so they can stay. They did a good job inserting the stunt woman there. You never really know that was a stunt woman if you didn't pause it and watch it really really slowly. A lot of times series back then were not great at hiding the fact that stuntmen and women were filling in. This is the first of a couple of miscarriages for Pam. As I mentioned earlier, that's a major storyline in the series going forward. Well, that's not Dr. Danvers, the doctor they usually have on call that's always rushing over to the house. think about it, JR has had a rough couple of episodes. The family would be pretty disgusted with him, you'd think, at this point. I mean, man, had those people break in and hold everybody hostage and humiliate Sue Ellen and nearly rape Lucy and or Pam. Now Pam's had this miscarriage, and they're not sure if JR tried to attack her or if he pushed her off the balcony or not off the balcony, off the hayloft or what. I mean, boy. Well, Pam can confirm that he went to the barn to apologize. I mean, he was apologizing as Pam fell. She would remember that, so she could back him up on that. The speech from Jock sounds good, but this is certainly, if Jock did say this to someone, he quickly forgot and didn't mean it, because the last thing Jock thinks of, as far as himself or the rest of the Ewings, is that they're just people. He does not think they're just like regular people, and he's damn proud of it. So the cover on that bed right there, that green sheet, reminds me of the stuff that, and maybe they still do this in some hotels and motels, but that horrible feeling, like cover or sheet or whatever it was you'd find on hotel beds, that was horrible. That's what that green thing reminds me of. Now, supposedly, and I've never really seen this confirmed, but Bobby was supposed to somehow die in this episode. This is what I've heard, and that would set up Pam as, I guess, the main protagonist of the series, and pitting her against the rest of the Ewings, the outsider against the rich people and all that. Again, I've never heard anyone connected with the show actually say that was the case, and it's hard to believe they would envision the series working out with Pam there at the ranch without Bobby. Um, I just don't know that that would have worked. And then they thought, well, we like Patrick Duffy so much in the role that we'll keep him around and we won't kill him off and all that. So, I mean, maybe they had thoughts of that, and they realized exactly what I just said, that it wouldn't work with Pam just sticking around or what. But I don't know. It's one of those things that's always been out there, but I've never seen it confirmed. And it's interesting there that they do end with a conversation between JR and Sue Ellen, who, as I know I'm repeating myself, but we're seen as secondary characters, but yet they end the episode with a conversation between the two of them, almost as if they were already kind of realizing how strong the two characters were. But there's a great look at the box ranch as this kind of wraps up. And that's, of course, the last time we'll see that. When the series returned for its first full season, they would be at Duncan Acres, filming the exteriors for at least the first part of the season. And Duncan Acres would become what everyone still basically knows as South Fork, and not the box ranch. But they also did not film any more interiors in the Aldridge house. There was a home in Dallas that they used for the model of what the home they wanted South Fork to look like inside, and they used that. So anyway, it's a very interesting kind of mini series that serves as one big pilot for what was to come. To wrap up, they're obviously still finding their way. There's some really good elements that are already present, but it would take a while, even as the series moved on to truly become what most people know as Dallas, which is JR is the central character and all his manipulations driving the storylines, and everyone else just reacting to mainly to what JR does. But it's, you know, it's still interesting to look back at these really early episodes and see what was intended originally and how it started to shift. But that's our look at the mini series slash pilot series for Dallas. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to move on to a couple of different things I've got in mind now. And those, the first of which I think is going to be kind of a location type commentary. I won't spoil it. And then what I'm thinking I might do is take a look at a TV movie called Fatal Vision, which is based on a book by Joe McGinnis. It's the true story of the murder of a Green Beret doctor's wife and their two young daughters. So I'm thinking about doing commentary on that after kind of a change of pace and a little bit of a local location for me here in the state of Georgia and the city of Atlanta. But look forward to doing that with you soon. If you have any other suggestions, please leave them in the comments below, or if you have anything to say about the series Dallas, also comment with that. And I will see you soon. Thanks a lot.